What's up YouTube, Alex Killian here, and today I want to talk about cameras. More specifically, a phrase about cameras. Now this is a phrase you've probably heard before. It's a phrase that honestly still pisses me off a little bit to hear, but ultimately made me a much better filmmaker, and it's this. What's in front of your camera is far more important than the camera itself. And I know right off the bat you may want to call bull, but just hear me out. I'll be honest guys, I'm a little bit out of shape. So when I decided that being a filmmaker was what I wanted to do with my life, really the only thing I knew about film was how incredibly powerful a good film can be. And that since films had such a profound impact on my life, I wanted to someday create things that could have that same impact on other people. But then when I really got into it, the whole thing seemed so daunting. It seemed like there was so many hurdles I had to jump just before I could make my first film. And the only thing I really knew I needed was a camera, right? So naturally, I started researching the very best camera money could buy, watching video after video on Canon versus Sony versus Blackmagic versus Red versus Arri, etc, etc, etc. Oh, but wait, you don't have an extra $60,000 laying around? I mean, I guess you're screwed, right? You're never gonna be a filmmaker until you get rich or sell a kidney, because you really need that expensive camera to make a film people will watch, right? So when you're just starting out, it really does seem like the biggest barrier to entry is all of this expensive equipment that you don't understand how all of these people can afford. But that's simply not true. The only real barriers to entry in filmmaking are the limits of your own mind. And I know that sounds cliche, but look, if you have a story that needs to be told and you have an eye for how you want to tell it, it's really not gonna matter what it's shot on. And obviously, this is really prevalent in the YouTube community. Most of the stuff we watch on YouTube is not high quality, but this actually happens in the film world also. So first of all, consider anything produced in the early days of film. Now these old classics can't really be compared to the insane video capability of today, but you watch these old films and even though they're less than ideal image quality, and oftentimes they're in black and white, you still really feel those stories. And they're still some of the most incredible films ever made. And going even farther back, some of the very first films were absolutely abysmal video quality. Yet they still impacted people so much that they changed the world. When one of the very first films was screened, the people in the theater were terrified that the train on screen was going to come through and kill them. And it looked like this. Then more recently in 1999, the Blair Witch Project was shot on a then like $200, now probably more like $50, digital 8 camcorders. And that film was a cult hit, still referenced as a game changer for the horror genre. Then the 2007 film Once was shot on a $500 camcorder recording to mini DV tapes, and it was also a cult hit, winning an Indie Spirit Award and an Oscar. Then just earlier this year, Steven Soderbergh put out a psychological thriller called UNSANE that was shot entirely on iPhones. And that film had a national release and made $12.3 million in the box office. Now those are just a couple examples, but this literally happens all the time. If the world and the story you've developed is really there, it's not gonna matter what it's shot on, because the story is meant to transcend the medium. Now, don't get me wrong here. The mechanics of filmmaking are very important, and there's something to be said for image quality. Undoubtedly, something shot on an 8K RED camera is going to be more immersive than something you shot on your iPhone. But when you're just starting out in filmmaking, the quality of your image just has to be good enough that it doesn't distract from your message, your story, the thing that your film is actually trying to communicate. Something shot on an 8K RED camera could totally suck. And conversely, something shot on an iPhone by someone who's really taken the time to develop their eye and their style could be an incredible film that changes lives and moves people. Shooting a film with any camera requires the same foundation, but it's really easy to get distracted by all the pretty gear and comparison videos and find yourself feeling like you can't make your film because you don't have the necessary resources. And I'm guilty of this myself, but I've learned that it's way easier to tell yourself you're not making your film because you don't have that camera than to be honest with yourself that you're not making your film because you're scared to try or because you haven't really taken the time to develop your story, and a new camera isn't gonna change that. Now, because I personally love the equipment part of filmmaking, I usually notice what something was shot on, and you're probably the same way. But for most people who aren't filmmakers, they're not connecting with the mechanics of your video, what it was shot on and how it looks. They're connecting with how it makes them feel and what it's saying. And undoubtedly image quality can help with that, but it's just not the most important part. The medium of film isn't the message. Your story is the message, and film is just the vehicle to deliver it. So, if you've made it this far into the video, you probably know I'm not actually going to tell you what the best camera is for aspiring filmmakers. Because I truly believe that the best camera for you is whatever camera you can get your hands on. Now, obviously you have to be honest with yourself about your level of experience and what the camera you have is capable of capturing. You have to figure out the strengths and weaknesses of your camera and then plan accordingly for your shoot. But just don't get down on yourself for not yet being where you want to be or having that amazing camera, because all that does is keep you from trying. It keeps you from growing to a point where you could maybe eventually afford that really nice camera. If you're really serious about wanting to be a filmmaker, the first step is not a camera. The first step is developing your eye, your style of filmmaking. It's figuring out what your passions are and what the stories are that you want to tell. And then just get out there and shoot with whatever you have. Most of us have a camera in our pockets that's capable of captivating an audience. The only limit is your mind. And speaking of that pocket camera that most of us have, over my years of filming everything on iPhone, I've stumbled onto several tips and tricks that can really elevate the quality of your iPhone footage. So if that's something you're interested in, please check back for my next video. And if you enjoyed this one, please hit that like button, subscribe, and give me a comment, let me know what you thought, and just get out there and shoot your story. I'm Alex Killian, and I'll see you next time.